I've worked with clients who have changed their lives around completely, so they don't bleed their trauma into their children. They cut it, and they're seeing their children not being in survival mode, able to express their authentic needs without the parents shouting at them. Because we're not shouting at our children, we're shouting at our parents. Why wasn't I able to be authentic here? And it doesn't stop me getting triggered, because sometimes I'm like, oh, hang on, it's not her. What happened when I was a kid, when I expressed that?
Yeah.
Clout. It's trying to heal, and also forgiveness is so important.
Welcome to New Earth Podcast, where we dive into inspiring stories, profound wisdom, and insights from remarkable individuals who are driving the consciousness shift on our planet. If you're ready to elevate your awareness and well-being, you're in the right place. But before we dive into today's episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Together, we'll continue to explore the ideas and conversations that help you up-level your consciousness. Thank you so much for your support and your comments, and for being part of this journey. So today we have the pleasure of welcoming Nickita Starck to New Earth Podcast, who has been a birth activist and advocate for many years after the traumatic birth of her daughter. And in 2021, she founded When Push Comes to Shove, a holistic initiative for maternity care. As a fellow ambassador for the People's Health Alliance, Nickita champions community health and empowerment. So join us today as we delve into her important work, exploring themes of generational trauma, healing, and empowerment for women in motherhood and beyond. Welcome, Nickita.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's lovely to have you on the podcast. And can we start today just by getting your understanding of what generational trauma is? And where it comes from, where it begins, if you can find, it's kind of like a chicken and an egg, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a tough one. Well, let me start by describing a really good study. I think that will help. So they studied rats in a cage, and they left the gate open of the cage. And every time, the rats tried to leave, they gave the rats an electric shock. And so after a time, they stopped trying to leave. Those rats had babies, and they put the babies in another cage who had had no experience of being shocked, and they never tried to leave. So essentially, we have generational trauma at the cellular level, and these cells vibrate at a certain rate, and it bleeds into generation after generation. And coupled with childhood trauma, living life unconsciously, it can exacerbate it. And this is where I've made a point to help women start that work, because childbirth education alone is not enough. It's almost superficial. Women wonder why they have really bad experiences. And yes, it can be lack of education on an intellectual level, but from where I'm standing, most of the trauma comes in because they don't know who they are, and they aren't able to connect with their authenticity. So, for example, I hear things like the midwife made me feel. The midwife doesn't make you feel anything. It's an unconscious script that you've got going on, and wounds are reappearing in one form or another, including the maternity system.
It's such an interesting one, when we start to delve into epigenetics, because those wounds of our ancestors are still very much alive in us. And how can we start to heal those, because it's often then, with epigenetics, it can shift generations. So it may be that we've inherited that from, say, our great grandmother, but then if the pattern becomes so strong, it's in every single generation. So the programming is there on top of that, that we kind of have that same built in, if for example, someone experienced anxiety as a child, because they felt that they were going to in an abusive environment, that can then corrupt the DNA, which then, like you say, like the rats in the cage, the next generations or a few generations on are actually just born with that anxiety. But it's then not specified, where that's come from. If we experience anxiety and we know it's from, a given environmental influence, then that if it's just kind of anxiety that's unexplainable, it's quite difficult then to trace it and to start to heal it. Do you have any ideas on how we can start to do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can't change your DNA, but that we know of. But you can change the way it presents. And what I mean by that is if you start to become aware of your internal scripts, maybe I should explain what I mean by that. So everyone has their subconscious, and it usually runs the show. Your subconscious will run the show. So when you're a child, your environment, social conditioning, your parental influence will create this script deep inside you. And often they present as wounds, core wounds. And for women especially, it's I'm not enough, fear of being rejected, fear of being abandoned. And these wounds will run the show. So if something in your life reminds you subconsciously, because usually our body remembers before our mind catches up. So you might be in a situation where you feel, oh, I'm not enough right now. Like I have to prove myself, or I feel I'm going to be rejected right now. So you're not consciously thinking that's what's happening, but your body is remembering because of core wounds. So when you're having an argument with a grown adult and they start reacting rather than responding, you're not actually having a conversation with an adult. You're having a conversation with the person at what age they were wounded. So you were talking to a 4-year-old, 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So when we become aware of it, that is step one. We are rehashing all our core wounds, and it is being manifested into our life. We are subconsciously seeking out that script. No sane person will think, well, there's no way I wanted to end up with a narcissist. Why would I want to end up with a narcissist? And this is a really hard hitting statement, but yes, you did. Not consciously, but your subconscious will seek a familiar hell rather than an unfamiliar heaven because it's comfortable and
Yeah,
it's
it
what we're
becomes safe,
used to.
doesn't it? Because it's what we've known.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're aware of it, that is a great first step. You think, okay, what's coming up here? This is an old script. Am I actually safe? Am I going to be abandoned? You It's so subtle. I mean, you see it in everyday life. Just watch someone when they get pissed off in a traffic. Like, I don't know, they've got out of the car and they've reacted straight away. You did this. You didn't. Blame, victim consciousness. And there are 3 zones. Let me explain this, probably be more helpful. There are 3 main zones I have noticed in which people operate. So you've got the bottom zone, which is the unconscious zone. And what I mean by that is, well, you grow up, you have to go to school, you have to get a job, you have to get married, and you have to do these things as women, you have to be agreeable, and then you retire and then you die. That's that first script, the unconscious living, where you just kind of let life happen to you. And then some people go, no, that's not for me. And they try to change things in their life. They want better. So that's the next level. And I call that the zone of excellence. So they're trying really, really, really hard to get ahead in life. They're doing a 9 to 5, but then a 5 till 9 to try and make their own business or something like that. They're trying to attract the better people into their life. But this zone of excellence, although they're trying to change things, they're doing it from here, from the ego construct. And they are trying desperately to make things happen in their own strength. And that leads to burnout. And then the top level is the zone of genius. And in the zone of genius, you are very aware of your old scripts and you are letting life happen through you rather than to you. So you won't take action unless you're aligned, unless you're doing it from your authentic self. And then when people find themselves in the zone of genius, they just end up swimming downstream and things come to them. So that's what I mean, like the healing journey. You have to be aware first. So at When Push Comes to Shove, we have like a sub company called the Unity Project, and that's about healing and specifically for women. And our tagline is feel, reveal, heal. So step one, we have to feel all this stuff and we have to be aware at the very least of what these scripts are.
Yeah, so then we can sort of observe them and do whatever we need to do to heal them. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not natural in our society to look within. You know, we have part of the programming has been that we look to the expert outside. And it's so key to stepping out of victim mode, which is, you know, when you were speaking about the driver earlier, you know, we it's not just looking for the advice outside, but it's also, you know, the blame outside. That's so that piece of self-responsibility. And, you know, okay, what is my role in that? And certainly, you know, my understanding of generational healing, that's such a huge piece. It's like, you know, it's gone through the generations, but it stops with me. You know, it's really standing there squarely and firmly and saying, it stops with me.
Yeah, it's so empowering. I think a lot of people at first glance will be like, what? So it's all my fault. And then they get past that and they go, okay, there's a difference between fault and accountability. Because your trauma is not your fault, but you are in charge of it. You are responsible for it. But I think a lot of people like the safety of blame because then they're not accountable and then they don't have to do anything and then they can fit a pigeonhole. Well, I'm this, I'm whatever label, borderline personality, PTSD, I've got this, so therefore I'm indemnified. And it makes it easier. But you are right. I think it's by design that societal conditioning has made us go outside ourselves to blame and outside ourselves to make ourselves happy. Now, anyone watching this, you will know this, that when the ego runs the show, hang on, let me back up. When I say ego, I don't mean narcissist. Your ego is how you identify with your thoughts. That's it. When your ego runs the show, it's very easy to go outside yourself. So a typical scenario will be, I'll be happy when I get my new car. I'll be happy when I have my new house. I'll be happy when this relationship is over. I'll be happy when I've got this piece of paper to say I'm worth anything. But you all know that isn't true. It might be temporary. And when you order your next parcel from Amazon, you might be excited when it comes through the door, but how many minutes does it last for? And there's nothing wrong with outside stuff as long as you're aware of what it is and it's actually a byproduct of the inside stuff. That inner peace everyone is searching for, unfortunately, is underneath the feelings that we don't want to go to.
I've heard you speak before. I know you were on the trauma roundtable that we did a while back, which I'll put a link to in this video as well for anyone that wants to listen into that as well. And I remember you saying, you know, that the reason that you're having kind of financial difficulties is because of your trauma. It's not, it's, you know, it's often that these things are what is kind of creating this kind of block for us. So, you know, it's very empowering, isn't it? If we can actually start to shift, if we can start to shift this trauma, we can start to really kind of create our life in a different way.
For sure. Yeah. And on first glance, you might think, well, what's my financial situation got to do with how I feel inside? Everything. Absolutely everything. Because you will have a block somewhere and I'm not worthy of it. or money doesn't grow on trees. Money, only evil people have money. Or you might even have a belief that there's some sort of moral superiority in being skint, like you're not feeding into the capitalist society. And that's fine. I'm not saying everyone should have an agenda to get rich, because it's not for everyone. But if you're thinking that it's because of your circumstances, and there is a lot of that. Look, there are people that are born into this world in absolute poverty, and it would take mind mastery to get the outside stuff to connect. But people have done it, and they've done it in one way, and that's changing their scripts and changing. They may not even realize they've done it, but if you can hold it here first, you can hold it here. But it's getting out of victim mentality, not just about money, anything, relationships, you know, your boss, how people treat you. It's always a direct reflection of how you feel about yourself. And I think it's such a blessing when I get triggered, because to me it's a lesson. I'm like, oh, what do I feel here? What's coming up here? This doesn't feel nice. But we can replace those triggers with glimmers and actually think to ourselves, what is the lesson here? Because we're not born to suffer. We choose that. We choose the suffering subconsciously.
If we're talking about the trauma being what's underneath of all this kind of stuff, you know, obviously there's programming as well, but if it's the trauma that's kind of the feeling state in a way, you know, that's the physiology. It feels really important to define what trauma is, because I know people like Gabor Mate speak about, you know, it not being the event, it's the wounds that last, you know, so it's what's actually happening in our physiology, in the dysregulation of our nervous system. How would you define trauma?
I'm a huge fan of Gabor Mate, and I think his description is excellent. It's not the event itself, it's what happens inside of you because of the event. Because the truth is, you can have the same event happen to two people and they don't have the same reaction. It's the story inside you. So let's back up and talk about trauma, because a lot of people, when they think of the word trauma, they think of something very extreme like a rape or witnessing a murder or abuse. And that, of course, it is those things. But what I'm referring to is the much more subtle trauma that is in all of us. So let's go way back. This is where pregnancy comes into it. When we're born, or like when we're in our mother's womb, if she's excreting a lot of cortisol, adrenaline, that will start to shape our physiology straight away. Then our birth. If a mother is coerced into a birth that she doesn't want, if she feels unempowered, if she feels sabotaged, and our babies are born into a sea of adrenaline and cortisol instead of oxytocin, that is going to set the stage for our nervous system. And then after that, very often, by the way, our parents don't mean to do any of this. Most of our parents are loving, wonderful people, but they too have trauma. And what happens is, if you don't heal your trauma, you're going to end up bleeding over someone that didn't cut you. And this is where it starts. So babies are so authentic. Children are so authentic. They make noise when they feel to. They express themselves as they feel to, because that's their authenticity. And they are born with it. We're all born with it. And then we have two choices when we're growing up, to stay authentic or to form an attachment. And why can't you do both? Because 9 times out of 10, our parents are so traumatized, they can't regulate their emotions and they don't have the tools to allow us to be authentic. So if we don't have an attachment as a child, we die. So let's take an example, and this is what I mean by subtle trauma. Let's say you're out in a supermarket and you're 2, 3 years old, and your mum bumps into an uncle and says, don't hug your uncle, you don't want to. Hug your uncle. God, stop embarrassing me. Hug your uncle. Because let's look at the mum's trauma.
Yeah.
I'm not enough. if my child doesn't do what I say, my uncle or the uncle will make me feel this way.
Yeah.
So she's not aware of her wounds. So, like I said, she's bleeding over someone that didn't cut her. Hug your uncle. So the child thinks, well, I can't be authentic because I'll be rejected. And then the fear of rejection comes in. And that's why they choose the attachment every time without fail. So children have two choices, either being authentic or an attachment, and they have to choose an attachment because they'll die. And then what happens is, because our parents haven't healed their wounds, they start bleeding into us. Like, you have to do this or I will feel like this. Again, it's outside stuff, outside stuff. It's blame, blame, blame. Or a kid is screaming in Tesco. Stop it! You're making me feel like this. You're embarrassing me. Everyone's looking. So the mum is concerned with outside stuff. The child is only doing authentic stuff. They're only concerned with the inside stuff because this is how they feel and they're expressing it. But they're not allowed to do it. And then, especially little girls, we have to be compliant. We have to be soothing for everyone else and agreeable. So little girls start to move further and further and further away from their authentic self. And then the ego starts to form, the egoic archetypes. There are lots, but I'll name a few. So you've got, if you want to learn more about this, read a book called A Radical Awakening by Dr. Shafali. She explains it beautifully. So we've got the givers, so victims. You'll all know a victim. You might be one yourself, but this isn't to be judged. Let's look at discernment instead of judgment. So, oh, typical, this has happened to me again. Oh, no, my luck, this will happen. I feel so smothered because these people won't let me. My boss won't let me. My mum wouldn't let me. It's all outside stuff. And then we've got martyrs. This is a lot in women. They will sacrifice every little piece of them so everyone else is happy. Then you've got the bleeding empath. They will feel everyone's pain and they will be very sensitive to what's going on. But under all of this, being a martyr and an empath, is they will focus on everyone else because they don't want to sit with their own feelings. That's terrifying. And then you've got takers. So you've got a tyrant. I need not explain what a tyrant is, or a helicopter. You know, there's always someone there making sure that other people are doing what they want them to do in order for them to have peace. But how exhausting. You've got to control everyone. So you've got a fleeting moment of happiness. And then you've got people that go into freeze mode. You've got the child, the princess. They want everything done for them. And these egoic archetypes will get stronger and stronger and stronger. It's to protect us. It is a shield because we can't be authentic. So then we have to use outside stuff. Look how the culture's become. We've got a suing culture. I'm going to blame this person and that person. When really 9 times out of 10, if you look deep, what part did I play in that? There's a really, really good story, right? There's a psychologist, and I forget the name of his book, but he was talking about something called the upper level limit problem. So you'll level up in one part of your life, and then your subconscious will start to sabotage you and bring you down to a comfortable hell, right? So he was seeing this woman, and she was really unlucky in love, but she was a fantastic entrepreneur. She was making tons of money, and she's like, I just can't find the right guy. I don't get that. It's not for me. Script, right? And then randomly one weekend, she called her therapist and said, I don't need to come to the next one. I have found someone. I had the most amazing weekend with this guy. It was beautiful. And he said, I urge you to come to the next one. She went, no, I don't need you anymore. I went, all right. 6 months later, she called him screaming, crying, I can't believe it. I've lost $200,000. And he's like, okay, what's happened? Are you still with this guy? Yes, I'm still with the guy. And how's the last 6 months been? When it's been blissful, it's been amazing. I found the one. He said, so how did you lose $200,000? And she replied that he had given her some trading advice and she lost it. So the therapist said, what does he do for a living? And she said, he's a software designer. And he went, whatever possessed you to take advice from a software designer about trading? So she could easily go outside herself. It's his fault. He told me this. But why are you so inauthentic that you've gone outside yourself? What's possessed you to take advice from someone like that? Why have you not come down to alignment and felt into it? Is this right for me? But this is what happens when we move away from our authentic self. We go outside. I need someone to help me with this and do this for me. And then it goes wrong. We blame, blame, blame.
Yeah, it's a powerful journey, you know, that self-responsibility. I'd just like to sort of backtrack a little bit to what you were saying about attachment, because a lot of that, you know, that kind of suppressing our kind of biological needs really, and our impulses, you know, as a infant, it's before our nervous system is even fully formed. So there's this sense of you know, what's going on in our head and the decisions that we made, but then we live our whole life, you know, by that. So it's how do we start to undo all of that, you know, because it becomes, we believe that's who we are so strongly because it's happened so early on.
Yeah, we get our sense of self from outside stuff and the stories that we've created. The first step is feel. I know that sounds so simplistic. Feel. We spend so much time, especially now with technology, going outside ourselves. We need external validation from likes on Facebook and Instagram. And if someone doesn't like and they have something to say, oh, I'm not enough, I'm not enough. Not that they're aware of that wound, but then they'll start lashing out. You've done this to trigger me. You've made me feel like this. Well, no one's made you feel anything. It's your core wound showing up. And it's actually yet another opportunity to fix it. So when you are feeling triggered, what we tend to do is not feel that. We don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that I'm not enough wound. I'm going to be a rejected wound. So what we do is we soothe. It could be endless hours scrolling through social media. It could be getting on the phone and gossiping with a friend and berating someone. Oh, what a bitch. They did this. They did this. Can you believe it? More validation, more validation. Or we pick up a bottle of wine or coffee or drugs. There are a lot of other forms of addiction that don't come under the drug and alcohol. I mean, there's social media, masturbation, porn. We try and soothe. But the truth is, soothing is not healing. You have to feel it. And if you are really brand new to this journey, get a therapist. Get a qualified psychotherapist who can help you navigate this. Sometimes it can't be done on your own and you will need support. But those of you who are feeling into this right now, feel it. And what I mean some people don't even know what that means because we are so disembodied. We are so living in our heads and have no idea what's going on here. So one, try and name it. Can you name the feeling? Is it anxiety? Is it dread? Then where in your body are you feeling it? Is it here? Got a lump in your throat? Have you got a wound that you've never been able to speak your mind? And also this will show up in physical form if you're not paying attention to it. Women who don't talk and they've got that deep sense of I can't speak my truth, they'll end up with thyroid problems. Women who don't feel grounded, rooted, usually trouble with the relationship with their mother, that will show up as endometriosis, IBS. I'm currently doing, you might see some posters. I'm doing my PhD in lifestyle medicine, and the mind, body, soul connection to health is paramount. But in the Western world, we ignore it. So when you can name your feeling, know where it is in your body. If you don't know where it is in your body, fine. Let's personify it. Let's give it a color. What color is it? What shape is it? Can you take it out of your body, put it on the table, ask it a question? But if you can feel the feeling, just feel it. You're going to have an amazing amount of resistance. Oh, this feels yucky. This is icky. Come back to it. And something amazing will happen. After a few minutes, it will dissolve. And then you're going to get triggered again, feel into it, catch it and bin it, catch it and bin it. Just keep feeling into the wound. And after you felt into the wound, you might have an epiphany like, oh, I felt I was going to get rejected there. It's clearly not true. It's not the same situation. And then you can transcend it.
And it's staying out of the story, isn't it, when we're feeling into it? Because it's easy to get caught up in the story, but it's just staying with the feelings that have been activated around that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so hard to sit with it because it is wildly uncomfortable. But the more you do it, the more you'll actually look forward to it and you'll get excited by a trigger because you'll think, great, growth opportunity. What have I not healed yet? It will feel great. And then it will take less and less time for it to dissolve. The triggers will be less frequent. I'm not saying they'll go away because unless you're an enlightened master sitting at the top of a mountain, you're not going to avoid a human experience.
And also, I'm starting to feel more and more that healing is a journey, not a destination. I have moments of having been on this for sort of 20 odd years, this healing journey of feeling like it hasn't worked, when I'm in those very painful places. But it's, there's just layers and layers to this. And sometimes it's not even ours, and particularly if we're talking about generational healing, potentially we're actually working on something of our ancestors. That's sitting there on top of the DNA, because whilst we, the DNA, whilst that might not be able to heal in terms of epigenetics, epi means on top of, so it means that we can, if we've inherited that anxiety from the great grandmother, we can actually shift that. And that's the incredible beauty of this kind of work, is that we can, anything that's sitting on top of the DNA, we can actually shift it. So sometimes it's incredibly powerful work, because we're literally working backwards and forwards down our generational line. So it's beautiful when we can see our daughters, perhaps not having the same triggers and patterns. It's kind of showing that things are shifting. Have you had any experience with that, working with women and their children?
Big time. I see it in my own children. I have a 4-year-old, and I need to start writing these things on a t-shirt. I was trying to get the TV to work. It wasn't working, and I was getting irritated. And she went, "You're not being yourself. Why aren't you being yourself?" And just her saying that, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I've gone into my head." And she was like, "Love is the answer to everything." And she's so right. My eldest, she's 16, and if I had an ounce of the introspection she did at her age, I would be some enlightened master now, I think. But so she was saying like, "Oh, this happened to my friend. Her mum took her laptop from her, and her stepmom said to her, 'Stop complaining about it. She does so much for you.'" And then my daughter went, "That's a narcissistic, immature parent response, because she's putting it on her rather than she's able to exercise her boundaries and speak her mind. She's being shut down." And I was like,
amazing.
And I see it, and the women I coach, as I won't embarrass her, but there's one woman in particular. When I met her, she trained with me to be a doula, and her life was unrecognizable back then. She'd come out of a very abusive relationship, domestic violence, very angry, going to all the freedom marches, but the very angry, these sort of things. And she has changed her world. She has gone inside herself, done the healing. She's realizing, hey, let's create, not criticize. She's running her own women's circles. Um, I'm speaking at one of her events next month. It is so exciting. She's like a little viable entrepreneur, and it's all in her stride. And that doesn't mean to say she doesn't get triggered and goes, "Oh, Nickita, something's happened here." Because look, no man, no woman is an island. We need community, and our therapists need therapy, and our mentors need mentoring, um, because that's human connection and love, right? But when you're so aware of it and you're doing the own work, that the sky's the limit of where you can go. So I've worked with clients who have changed their lives around completely. So they don't bleed their trauma into their children. They cut it, and they're seeing their children not being in survival mode, able to express their authentic needs without the parents shouting at them. Because we're not shouting at our children, we're shouting at our parents. Why wasn't I able to be authentic here? And it doesn't stop me getting triggered, because sometimes I'm like, oh, hang on, it's not her. What happened when I was a kid, when I expressed that?
Yeah.
Clout. It's trying to heal, and also forgiveness is so important. We cannot keep blaming our parents. It took my mum to die for me to forgive her. And when she died, I went down a very bad route. I had the wrong people around me. I was abusing myself with drugs and all sorts. And I got to the pit of despair, where I looked around me in my environment and thought, okay, there's no one else to blame. She's dead. This is all me. I've got to do something. And it's the most empowering realization to know that you are in complete control of your life. And when you can't control things externally, it's so easy to act in light and when everyone around you is behaving exactly how you want. But when things are in chaos around you, but you can still have that inner peace and come back to self, and feel that real you, and let your higher self take the wheel. That is so peaceful.
It's definitely the time to do the trauma work, isn't it? When things are going well, if we can, but our tendency is to leave it until everything's falling apart. It's kind of human nature, isn't it? But if we can make these steps when things are good, then we'll make so much more progress with in terms of our nervous system regulation.
Yeah, you've got to get in ahead of it.
Yeah.
You've got to give, easier said than done with many scenarios. I grant you that. But work towards forgiveness, because it's only going to hurt you if you carry this wound. Like drinking poison and expecting them to die. You've got to do it for you. And don't rely on outside stuff. I'll tell you a little parable, shall I? One of my favorites.
Please do.
And it's about representing the difference between outside stuff and doing the inner work. So there was a farmyard, and there was this manky old pheasant, and he was looking longingly at the top of a tree, and he said, I really want to get to the top branch. And there was a bull in the farmyard, and he said, I know how you get up there. You eat my poo. Eat my poo every day and you'll get to the top branch. And he was like, what? That's disgusting. No. He said, trust me, try a bit, you'll get to that next branch. So the pheasant tried it, and lo and behold, he got to the next branch, and he kept doing it. And at the end of the week, he was where he wanted to be, at the top branch, and he was so happy. Next day, the farmer comes out, sits on his rocking chair on the porch, looks up, sees a manky old pheasant, gets his gun, shoots him dead. Moral of the story is, bullshit might get you to the top, but it won't keep you there.
Love it. That's a brilliant one.
We've got to do the inner work. It's not going to last otherwise. We need to find peace.
Thank you. That's a fabulous way to end. I'd just like to, before we finish up today, I'd just love to touch on, you mentioned community earlier. And I'd just love to hear your thoughts on the role of community support with this kind of healing work, and particularly, things like the PHA, People's Health Alliance, the role of that in health and empowerment during these times.
Community is essential. Your vibe attracts your tribe. If you're vibing at a level where you're going to have people coming into your life that are non-judgmental, loving, supportive, you will get those things. And when you do get those things, it makes the healing a lot easier because you can be held physically, emotionally, supported. You're not alone. There's other people going through it. I run workshops every 2 months called Heal Her. The next one's on the 9th of October. And the community is beautiful. The last one was in August, and the community is still talking now on WhatsApp. They're sharing their stories, they're sharing tips, support. It's imperative.
It really is. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we finish up today?
Yeah, if you want some free tips, subscribe to my Substack. It's I'm sure you can put the link in below. It's Nickita Starck. There's lots of tips to healing, understanding generational trauma, understanding the mind-body connection to health. If you want to go one further, come to our Heal Her workshop. Just go to whenpushcometoshove.co.uk and then click on the Unity project, and underneath you will see Heal Her courses, etc., etc. And then reach out if you want to talk. If you want some coaching, just let me know. Here to help.
Amazing. And I'll put all your information in the description so that people can find you. Thank you so much, Nickita. It's been amazing speaking with you today. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening in. Bye for now.